My husband's apprentice, boasted she, could disarm bombs blindfolded, relying on her so-called intuition. Her reckless misjudgment triggered a bomb secondary detonation sequence, endangering an entire building. I intervened using the dangerous liquid nitrogen condensation method to save the day. As a result, Rita Smith was removed from frontline duties and placed under investigation. Patrick Munoz tried to defend her, but I stopped him cold. If you back her now, you won't just fail to save her, you'll be dragged down with her. Crushed by the pressure, Rita staged an accident that killed her, leaving a letter blaming him for abandoning her in her hour of need. He said nothing, only preserving her. Letter in his study. Years later, he became a nationally renowned bomb disposal expert. During a terrorist attack, I was strapped to a timed explosive. He arrived to defuse it, but repeated Rita's fatal mistake. As the timer ticked down, he gave a bitter laugh. Rita was just nervous back then. If I'd supported her, she'd be a hero. Today, the bomb detonated, leaving nothing of me behind. When I opened my eyes again, I was back to the point when he tried to defend Rita. He didn't know that the building housed the nation's top secret core server. The moment I realized I'd been reborn, I abandoned my plan to rush to the scene. Instead, I returned to my dorm and switched off my encrypted communicator. In my past life, Rita Smith's error had her frantically messaging me for help. I just completed a grueling mission, sleepless for 3 days, yet I risked my life, enduring liquid nitrogen burns to save the core server in that building. Because of my efforts, the military spared her a court martial, opting for suspension and investigation instead. If she had avoided further mistakes, she could have returned to duty. But Rita's fragile ego couldn't handle her colleagues' scorn. She staged a fatal accident that blew herself up. Years later, Patrick Munoz's obsession with proving her right led to my death in an explosion. I pulled the blanket over my head and slept until dawn. The next morning, I turned on my communicator. The screen lit up with over 100 missed calls and red alerts. Undazed, I took my time washing up, donned my uniform, and headed to the scene. Outside the cordon, the air was thick with dread. Despair etched on every face. Rita sat on the ground, disheveled and trembling like a leaf. Her colleagues glared with cold venom. This is your fault, Rita. You and your stupid intuition. Nonsense. You triggered the secondary detonation. We're all dead now. General Wilson will have us all court-martialed. Rita's gaze swept the crowd, landing on me. Her eyes briefly lit up as if I were her salvation, but then they darkened with resentment. She pointed at me, yelling at the top of his lungs. It was her. I called her all night. She could have saved us, but she turned off her phone. To lest all eyes turned to me, sharp as blades, seizing a moment. Editha stumbled toward me and thrust her communicator in my face. The screen blazed with call logs. You know what's in that building? She shrieked, tears streaming. National secrets, yet you went offline at a critical moment. What's your agenda? The crowd fell silent, waiting for my response. The sight of her twisted face reignited my past life's fury. My hand flew up, delivering a sharp slap across her face. Rita clutched her face.
Done.
I shook my stinging wrist, my voice cold as ice. Have you lost your mind? I held up the mission roster for all to see. The schedule and signatures. Unmistakable. Last night's lead operator was Eureka. I was on mandatory rest after a 72-hour special op. My name isn't on this list. Crowd erupted, their anger. Finding a new target.
Right.
Mary just got back from the Red Scorpio mission, diffusing 3 linked mines. She could bodily stand. Rita, you always hide behind Patrick's protection, dumping the worst jobs on her. Now you screw up and want her to take the fall. You're disgusting, dragging others down with you. The accusations hit Rita like a barrage of stones. Her face drained of color, and she collapsed in despair. Just then, a military SUV screeched to a halt at the cordon. Clifford, Wilson, and Patrick stepped out with grim expressions. Patrick and I were once the military's golden couple, envied by all. But now his gaze slid past me without a flicker of recognition. He rushed straight to Rita, draping his jacket over her and pulling her into his arms. Don't be scared. I've got you, he said, his voice softer than I'd ever heard. I won't let anything happen to you. My heart turned to ice because in my past life, he'd said the same thing. Rita was just nervous. He is gifted. You should help her grow. Now he displayed his bias for all to see. The crowd watched with anger and disdain. Clifford's gaze cut between us before he summoned me to the command vehicle. Once inside, his stoic facade crumbled, revealing panic in his battle-hardened eyes. For the first time, I don't care about the protocols, he roared, slamming his fist on the map table, rattling the equipment. You have to save that server. If it goes, our entire unit will face a firing squad. I met his bloodshot eyes. Calmly, General, I'll try. He paused, looking at me, and I continued. But I have a request. Pulled a document from my pocket and handed it over. It was Patrick's signed approval for Rita's special talent field application. The word talent now seemed bitterly ironic. Patrick approved her operation. I said, I'm not cleaning up this mess alone. He needs to pay for his so-called innovation. Clifford's eyes narrowed. He snatched the paper, scanned it, and slammed it down that fool. Cool. He bellowed, nearly tearing the roof off. You have my word. His expert promotion is dead. All his advancement paths are frozen as of today. My lips curved into a cold smile. I picked up a pen and signed the mission exemption and liability waiver, sealing Patrick's fate. I donned my blast suit and rushed into the building. There were no blueprints or plans. I just followed my past life's memories to bypass Rita's faulty wiring, ignore the blinking red traps, and locate the core server with precision. Liquid nitrogen hissed white, mist filling the air. The piercing alarm stopped, indicating that the secondary detonation had been neutralized. I removed my helmet, sweat, and fog, blurring my vision. Exhausted, I slumped against the wall, nearly fainting. Outside, the crowd cheered in relief. My colleagues rushed to support me, their voices thick with gratitude. Mary, you're incredible. We knew you'd pull it off. I declined their celebratory invites, eager to go home and rest. As I reached for my car, a sharp pain hit my neck. A hand clamped over my mouth, dragging me backward. My struggles were futile as I was shoved into a dark storage room. The door slammed shut and, locked, tied to a cold chair, I couldn't move. A flickering bulb revealed a familiar silhouette. Patrick crouched before me, brushing my hair with unsettling tenderness. Don't struggle, sweetheart. The ropes will hurt you. His words slithered like a snake, making my skin crawl. His eyes gleamed with obsession. You ruined Rita. You know that? His soft tone hit like a hammer. The report lists her as the primary offender. Her career is over. She brought it on herself. I shot back. He shook his head, sighing as if I were being unreasonable. No, I can save her. He got up and went to the corner to grab a steel pipe as thick as an arm. I can't disarm bombs anymore. They'll have to reinstate her. Help her one last time. Don't be scared. I promise we will. Make it up to you. Threads surged from my feet to my skull as I watched him approach. Are you crazy? My hands save lives, not paving the way for your apprentice. Guilt flickered in his eyes, but his grip on the pipe didn't waver. I'll take care of you forever. The pipe swung down with a whistle, shattering my right wrist. Pain drowned me like a tidal wave. My vision darkened, and I nearly passed out. He dropped the pipe and knelt, wrapping my mangled hand in a towel with eerie care, as if handling a priceless artifact. He leaned close, his hot breath assailing my neck. He whispered, "Stay here one night. Once the investigation is done, I'll get you out. Rita's reputation must stay spotless." He got up and left without looking back. The light went out, plunging the room into darkness. I woke to violent shaking, my wrist throbbing. I groaned, cold sweat soaking my back. Patrick gripped my shoulders, his bloodshot eyes wild. "Mary, the servers' cooling system failed." Patrick's roar made my ears ringing. The liquid nitrogen caused metal fatigue. Why didn't you warn me? I stared at the man who had shattered my wrist just hours ago, now blaming me for not predicting the fallout of his actions. I forced a bitter laugh. High precision equipment. Flash frozen. Failure is normal, isn't it? My calm words snapped his frayed nerves. Shut up. He seized my uninjured arm, dragging me out like a madman. Fix it. Rita's still under investigation. She can't take more blame. It was Rita. Again, all he cared about was her. I stumbled, my broken wrist dangling. Each jolt sent agony through me. With all my strength, I wrenched free and thrust my mangled hand in his face. Look, my hand is ruined. His pupil shrank, guilt flashing before giving way to mania. It's fine. You're so skilled. You can do it one-handed, right? He looked at me, almost pleading for Rita. Try just once. The command room door flew open. Clifford stormed in with guards. Clifford's boots clicked like gunshots. On the concrete floor behind him, four heavily armed military MPs fanned out, their rifles held at low ready. The atmosphere in the command room, already tense from the cooling system alert, turned absolutely freezing. What is the meaning of this? Clifford's voice wasn't at a roar this time. It was a low, dangerous rumble that vibrated in the floorboards. His eyes locked onto Patrick, who was still desperately clutching my uninjured left arm, and then drifted down to my right hand. My right wrist was twice its normal size, a horrific purple and black mass of swollen flesh and protruding bone, crudely wrapped in a blood-stained towel. It hung limply, trembling with involuntary spasms that sent white-hot spikes of agony straight to my brain. General Patrick stammered, his face instantly draining of color. He let go of my left arm as if it had suddenly turned into white hot metal. He took a step back, raising his hands in a placating gesture. It's not what it looks like. Mary had an accident. She fell during the extraction from the server room last night. I was just trying to help her. He lied. I interrupted, my voice flat, devoid of any tears or hesitation. The pain was excruciating, but the cold fury burning in my chest acted as a powerful anesthetic. General Clifford, Major Patrick Munoz, lured me into the South Wing storage locker after the mission. He bound me to a chair and used a heavy steel pipe to deliberately shatter my right wrist. His goal was to permanently disable my dominant hand so that his apprentice, Rita Smith, would have to be reinstated to handle the server crisis. A collective intake of breath echoed through the room from the operators and guards. Mary, are you insane? Patrick hissed, his eyes wild with a mixture of terror and disbelief. Why would you say such things? We're husband and wife. I've loved you for years. General, she's delirious from the pain and the exhaustion of the 72-hour operation. She's hallucinating. The storage room is equipped with a motion-activated security camera on the secondary grid, I said, looking directly at Clifford. It's outside the main security loop, but it feeds directly to the auxiliary log. The steel pipe he used is still in the corner of that room, covered in my blood and his fingerprints, the towel wrapped around my wrist belongs to his personal locker in the officers' quarters. Clifford didn't even look at Patrick. He simply jerked his chin toward the MPs, secure the storage room, retrieve the evidence, and call the medical team down here immediately. Yes, sir. 2 of the guards barked, sprinting out of the room. General, please listen to me. Patrick cried out, his voice cracking. He tried to step toward Clifford, but the remaining 2 MPs instantly raised their weapons, locking them onto his chest. I did it for the unit. Mary is too stubborn. She wanted to monopolize the bomb disposal division. If she's injured, we have to use other talents. Rita has incredible potential. Shut your mouth, Major Clifford said, his voice dripping with disgust. You just admitted to crippling the military's top explosive ordnance disposal specialist during an active national security crisis. That is not just assault. Under wartime protocol, that is high treason. Just then, the red warning lights in the command room flared to a blinding intensity. A harsh rhythmic siren began to wail from the overhead speakers. General, a technician shouted from the console, his fingers flying across the keyboard. The core server's internal temperature has just crossed the critical threshold of 85 degrees. The liquid nitrogen cooling lines are undergoing rapid thermal shock. The metal fatigue is causing micro fractures. If we don't initiate a manual pressure stabilization sequence within 30 minutes, the entire server array will undergo a catastrophic hardware meltdown. The National Defense Database will be permanently wiped. The panic in the room was palpable. Everyone knew what a total wipe meant. The erasure of the country's entire border defense grid, leaving us completely blind. Patrick's eyes flickered with a sudden, desperate calculation. He looked at Clifford, then at me, a sickening smirk beginning to form on his lips. General, Mary's hand is broken. Even if she wants to help, she can't hold a precision calibrator. But Rita is outside. She knows the layout. She studied under me for 2 years, under my remote guidance. She can perform the manual stabilization if you authorize her. Temporary reinstatement. We can save the server right now. He actually thought he had won. He believed that the sheer desperation of the situation would force Clifford to pardon him and elevate Rita. In his mind, my ruined hand was the perfect stepping stone for his beloved apprentice. I looked at Patrick's eager, sweating face, and a sense of profound pity washed over me. He was so blinded by his obsession with Rita's talent that he couldn't see the trap he had walked into. General, I said, my voice cutting through the blaring sirens. Major Munoz is correct about one thing. My right hand is useless. Patrick's eyes lit up with triumph. See, she admits it, but I continued looking Patrick dead in the eye. I don't need my right hand to fix a basic thermal expansion valve, and I certainly don't need a fraud who triggered a secondary detonation sequence to touch a delicate national security asset. You, Patrick, scoffed, his tone dripping with condescension. Mary, stop letting your jealousy ruin your judgment. You're right-handed. You've always been right-handed. You can't even hold a scalpel with your left hand, let alone execute a micromillimeter pressure adjustment on a failing nitrogen line. If you fail, the whole country pays the price. I am right-handed. I agreed, softly. But during the Red Scorpion mission last year, when my right shoulder was dislocated by shrapnel, I spent 3 months retraining my left hand for precision tasks in secret. The logs of my simulation scores are in a central database signed by General Clifford himself. Clifford's eyes sharpened. He looked at me, a grim nod of confirmation passing between us. She's telling the truth. Mary's left-handed precision scores are in the top 98th percentile. Patrick's jaw dropped. His hands began to shake. No, that's impossible. Why? Didn't you tell me I'm your husband? Because I knew exactly what kind of man you were, I said, my voice cold and clear. You wanted to find my weakness so you could give Rita my strength, but I never give anyone the power to destroy me twice. I turned to Clifford. General, I will go down and stabilize the system, but I have 2 conditions. Name them, Clifford said without hesitation. First, Major Patrick Munoz and his apprentice, Rita Smith, are to be stripped of their security clearances and placed in maximum security holding cells. Immediately, they are not to be allowed anywhere near the communication systems or the server room. Consider it done. Clifford barked. He turned to the MPs. Arrest him. Drag him out of my sight. Mary, you can't do this. Patrick screamed as the heavy-handed imps slammed him against the wall, forcing his arms behind his back. The handcuffs clicked shut with a harsh final sound. I did this for us, for our future. If You ruin me. You ruin our family. We were never family, Patrick, I said, watching him get dragged toward the door. You are just a parasite feeding on my achievements, and today the host is cutting you off. As they dragged him past the threshold, he locked eyes with me, his face twisted in a mask of pure, unadulterated hatred. But underneath the anger, I saw the first seeds of genuine terror. He finally realized that the docile, self-sacrificing wife he had exploited in his past life was gone forever. Second condition, General, I said, turning back to Clifford. I want Rita Smith to watch the entire stabilization process from the observation gallery. Let her see exactly what intuition looks like when compared to actual hard-earned expertise. Clifford's lips tightened into a thin, grim line. Granted, get the medical team to split bind your wrist, Mary. You have 25 minutes. The air in the deep basement of a server complex was freezing, filled with a thick, ghostly white fog of escaping nitrogen. The hiss of the leaking gas sounded like a pit of angry vipers. My right arm was bound tightly against my chest in a rigid fiberglass splint packed with fast-acting local anesthetics that numbed the worst of the pain but left me feeling slightly lightated. In my left hand, I held a heavy titanium thermal calibrator. The tool felt awkward, heavy, and unfamiliar in my non-dominant grip, but as I closed my fingers around the handle, a cold, steady focus took over my mind. I stepped onto the metal gantry, overlooking the massive humming server racks through the reinforced triple pane glass of the observation gallery. Above, I could see the pale, terrified face of Rita Smith. She was flanked by 2 armed guards, her hands pressed against the glass. Her eyes were wide, with a mixture of fear, jealousy, and desperation. She knew that if I succeeded, her lies, her intuition, and her career would be permanently buried. If I failed, she would be dragged down with me to the firing squad. Mary! Clifford's voice came through my earpiece. The pressure in the primary cooling jacket is at 92 psi and rising. If it hits 100, the safety valves will blow, venting the remaining nitrogen and causing an immediate thermal runaway. You have to manually adjust the 3 bypass valves in sequence. Understood. General, I replied, my voice steady, despite the adrenaline surging through my veins. Initiating bypass sequence. Now, I moved down the gantry, my boots echoing in the metallic chamber. The fog was so thick I could barely see my own feet. The cold was biting, freezing the sweat on my forehead. I reached the first valve. It was a high-pressure manual wheel, stiff from the sub-zero temperatures. In my past life, I had turned this wheel with both hands, easily managing the resistance. Now I had to do it with only my left hand, while keeping my balance on a slick, wet gantry. I hooked my left arm through the spokes, using my body weight to break the initial seal. Crack. The valve groaned, ice shattering off the iron wheel. I pulled with everything I had. The muscles in my left shoulder, screaming under the strain. Above, Rita was leaning forward, her breath fogging the glass. I knew what she was thinking. She was waiting for me to slip, waiting for the tool to fall from my numb fingers. With a final desperate heave, I spun the wheel 3 full rotations. First valve stabilized. I panted into, the mic pressure dropping to 85 psi. Good job, Mary, Clifford said, his voice tense. The second valve is 20 meters down. The structural integrity of the floor plates there is compromised due to the thermal shock. Watch your step. I crawled forward, the pain in my right wrist starting to break through the local anesthetic like a dull, throbbing hammer. My vision blurred slightly. I stopped, biting my lip until I tasted copper to force myself back to reality. I couldn't faint. Not here. Not in front of them. I reached the second valve, but as I stepped onto the platform, a loud ping echoed through the chamber. A high-pressed nitrogen line 10 FTOA had ruptured, spraying a jet of supercooled gas directly across the path to the third valve. The temperature in that specific corridor plummeted to minus 50 degrees in seconds. If I walked through that jet, the liquid nitrogen would freeze my flesh to the bone instantly, rendering my remaining hand useless. Mary, abort, Clifford yelled through the comms. The rupture is too close to the third valve. We're evacuating the facility. Get out of there. No, I said, my voice rising above the roar of the escaping gas. If we evacuate, the database is lost. I can bypass it. In the gallery, Rita was frantically shaking her head, a hysterical smile beginning to spread across her face. She thought she was saved. She thought my failure would prove that the task was impossible for anyone validating her own incompetence. Mary, how? Clifford asked. You can't get past the jet with one hand. I don't need to get past it, I said, looking up at the ceiling. Above, the server racks ran a network of high voltage power conduits. If I could climb the maintenance ladder using only my left arm and legs, I could crawl along the top support beam, bypass the ruptured line from above, and drop down directly onto the third valve. It was a suicidal maneuver for a normal technician, but I wasn't normal. I was a survivor who had already died once. I had nothing left to fear. I slung the thermal calibrator over my shoulder, grabbing the icy metal rungs of the maintenance ladder with my left hand. I began to climb. Every movement was an exercise in pure agony. The jarring motion of climbing sent waves of excruciating pain from my shattered right wrist straight down my spine. My teeth ground together so hard I fear they would shatter. Sweat poured down my face, freezing instantly into tiny beads of ice on my cheeks. Step, reach, pull. I climbed 5M, 10M until I was level with the massive support beams below me. The white fog swirled like a stormy sea, punctuated by the occasional flash of warning lights. I dragged my body onto the narrow steel beam. It was barely a foot wide, slick with condensation and frost. I had to crawl on my knees, dragging my spinted right arm behind me, using only my left forearm to pull my weight forward. Through the fog, I looked over at the observation gallery. Rita's face had gone completely pale. The smirk was gone, replaced by a look of sheer, unadulterated horror. She was watching a crippled woman perform a feat of physical and mental endurance that she couldn't even comprehend in her wildest dreams. She was realizing with absolute certainty the vast, unbridgeable chasm between her talent and my reality. I reached the point directly above the Third valve. Below me, the jet of liquid. Nitrogen hissed violently, a curtain of white death. I unhooked the thermal calibrator with my left hand, holding on to the support beam with my legs and my broken right elbow, wedging it against a vertical strut to anchor myself. The pain was so intense that my vision turned completely white for a second. I squeezed my eyes shut, forcing the darkness away. Just one more step, I told myself, for the life you lost, for the justice you deserve. I leaned down over the edge of the beam, dangling precariously in the frozen air. Using my left hand, I aimed the heavy calibrator at the emergency manual release pin on top of the third valve. It was a target no larger than a coin 10 feet below me, partially obscured by the swirling fog. She's going to drop it. I heard a technician's voice whisper in the background of the comms line. She's going to miss. I took a deep breath, matching the rhythm of my heartbeat to the ticking of the internal clock in my head. 3, 2, 1. I released the calibrator. The heavy titanium tool fell straight through the fog, slicing through the air. With a faint whistle, clang, a solid metallic impact echoed through the chamber. The calibrator hit the emergency release pin perfectly, driving it down into the housing. The primary bypass valve groaned and spun open, automatically under the sudden hydraulic pressure. The loud hiss of the escaping nitrogen instantly began to subside. The violent vibration in the floorboards died down to a gentle hum. On the console monitor in the command room, the red warning lights blinked, turned amber, and finally settled into a solid, beautiful green. Pressure stabilized at 45 psi. The technician's voice announced, trembling with a mixture of disbelief and awe. The core server is. It's safe. The database is secure. For a moment, there was absolute silence on the comms. Then a deafening cheer erupted from the command room. I could hear people shouting, clapping, and crying with relief. I collapsed backward onto the steel beam, my chest heaving, my left arm trembling so violently I could barely keep my grip. I looked up at the ceiling, a slow, cold smile spreading across my lips. I had done it. I had saved the server, saved the unit, and I had done it on my own terms, leaving Patrick and Rita with absolutely no room to squirm out of their fate. I looked over at the observation gallery. Rita Smith was no longer looking at me. She had fallen to her knees on the floor of the gallery, her face buried in her hands, her shoulders shaking with hysterical, silent sobs. She knew her life was over. 3 days later, the military tribunal convened in the high-security courtroom of the Central Command. The room was Spartan, lit by harsh fluorescent lights that cast long, sharp shadows across the polished concrete floor. At the elevated judges' bench sat General Clifford and 3 other high-ranking officers of the military high command. Their faces were carved from granite, cold and unyielding. I sat in the front row of the gallery, my right arm wrapped in a clean white medical cast supported by a black sling. Next to me sat my legal counsel. On the opposite side of the room, behind the defense table, stood Patrick and Rita. They looked unrecognizable, stripped of their ranks, their uniforms, and their medals. They wore the drab gray jumpsuits of military detainees. Patrick's hair was disheveled, his eyes bloodshot, and sunken, surrounded by dark circles. The arrogance that had defined him for years had been completely hollowed out, leaving behind a desperate, pathetic shell of a man. Rita looked even worse. She was trembling constantly, her eyes darting around the courtroom like a cornered animal. She kept trying to lean toward Patrick for support, but he ignored her, his eyes locked onto the floor. The golden couple of the bomb disposal unit had turned on each other the moment the cell doors slammed shut. "This tribunal is now in session," Clifford announced, his voice echoing in the quiet room. "We are here to hand down the verdict and sentencing in the case of former Major Patrick Munoz and former apprentice Rita Smith, charged with high treason, sabotage of critical national security infrastructure, and the attempted murder of a senior officer during an active crisis." The military prosecutor stood up holding a thick leather folder. "Generals, the evidence is absolute. We have recovered the security footage from the auxiliary grid in the South Wing storage locker. The footage clearly shows Patrick Munoz physically restraining Mary and using a heavy steel tool to shatter her right wrist." The prosecutor touched a button, and the large monitor on the wall came to life. The video was silent, but the brutality was sickening. It showed Patrick screaming in my face, his expression twisted in manic obsession, before raising the heavy steel pipe and bringing it down on my wrist. On the screen, my body jerked in agony, but my face remained remarkably calm, staring back at him with a chilling intensity. A collective murmur of disgust ran through the courtroom. Furthermore, the prosecutor continued, "We have completed the forensic analysis of Patrick Munoz's personal computer and encrypted files. We found a history of systematic intellectual property theft. For the past 3 years, over 80% of the technical papers, strategic plans, and device disarming protocols published under Patrick Munoz's name were actually authored by Mary. He used his position as her husband and superior officer to systematically suppress her achievements, while presenting them as his own to secure his promotion to national expert." Patrick flinched as if he had been struck. He opened his mouth to speak, but his defense attorney quickly grabbed his arm, shaking his head. And finally, the prosecutor said, turning his gaze to Rita, "We have retrieved the full chat logs between Rita Smith and Patrick Munoz during the night of the incident. The logs prove that Rita Smith was fully aware that her intuition had triggered the secondary detonation sequence. Instead of reporting it immediately, she spent 4 hours messaging Patrick, begging him to cover it up. Patrick instructed her to blame the entire incident on Mary, promising that he would neutralize Mary so she couldn't testify against them." Rita let out a sharp, choked sob, burying her face in her hands. "It wasn't my fault. He told me to do it. He said he would take care of everything. He said Mary was just a tool we could use." "Shut up, you stupid girl," Patrick suddenly roared, turning on her with snarling fury. "If you hadn't screwed up that simple bomb disposal in the first place, we wouldn't be here. I ruined my life to save yours, and you dragged me down with you." Silence. Clifford slammed his gavel, the sharp sound echoing like a pistol shot. "The defendants will maintain order, or they will be removed and sentenced in absentia." The guard stepped forward, forcing Patrick back into his seat. He slumped down, his chest heaving, his face red with impotent rage. Clifford looked down at the documents in front of him, his expression grim. The board has reviewed the evidence. The actions of the defendants constitute a direct threat to the national security of this country. Your personal ambitions, your greed, and your cowardice nearly resulted in the destruction of the nation's core server and the loss of countless lives. He looked at Patrick Munoz for the crimes of treason, sabotage, and the deliberate crippling of a military asset. You are hereby stripped of all ranks, benefits, and honors. You are sentenced to 30 years of hard labor in the Black Rock Military Penitentiary with no possibility of parole. Patrick's eyes went wide. He collapsed back into his chair, his head shaking in denial. 30 years. No, that's a death sentence. Clifford then turned his cold, piercing gaze to Rita Smith for the crimes of conspiracy, sabotage, and presenting fraudulent qualifications that endangered active operations. You are stripped of all military standing. You are sentenced to 15 years in a military correctional facility, followed by a permanent lifetime ban from any government, military, or civil security employment. No, please, General, have mercy. Rita screamed, falling to her knees and grabbing the edge of the defense table. I didn't know. I was just following Patrick's orders. I'm young. I have a future. You can't do this to me. The sentence is final, Clifford said, his voice cold and flat. Take them away. The MP stepped forward, grabbing Patrick and Rita by the arms. As they were being dragged out, Patrick suddenly broke free of the guard's grip for a split second. He turned toward me, his eyes wide with a desperate, pleading light. Mary, please, he cried, tears streaming down his face. Tell them we're still married. Tell them you forgive me. If you speak for me, they'll reduce the sentence. Mary, I loved you. I still love you. You can't let them do this to me. I stood up slowly, adjusting my black sling. I walked over to the railing separating the gallery from the defense area, stopping just a few feet from him. In my past life, Patrick, I whispered, my voice too low for the courtroom to hear, but clear enough for him to catch every word. I died in an explosion because of your obsession with this woman. You stood over me as the timer ticked down and you laughed. You said Rita was just nervous. You said if you had supported her, she would have been a hero. Patrick's breath hitched. His eyes widened in absolute confusion and horror. What are you talking about? Past life? Mary, you're insane. I'm not insane, Patrick. I said, a cold, beautiful smile touching my lips. I just remembered everything, and this time I made sure you got exactly the heroes ending you deserved. The MPs grabbed him again, dragging him backward through the double doors. His desperate, terrified screams echoed down the hallway until the heavy steel doors slammed shut, cutting him off from my world forever. Rita was dragged out next, sobbing hysterically, her legs trailing on the concrete floor like a broken doll. She had relied on her intuition to get everything she wanted, and in the end, her intuition had led her straight to a cold, dark cell. The courtroom cleared out, leaving only Clifford and me. Clifford walked down from the bench, stopping in front of me. He looked at my splinted right arm, his expression softening slightly. How is the hand, Mary? He asked. The doctors say the bone will heal, I said, looking down at the white cast, but the nerve damage in my right wrist is permanent. I'll never be able to handle a high-precision detonator with my right hand again. Clifford sighed a heavy, sorrowful sound. I'm sorry, Mary. You're the best we had. It's a tragedy for the military. It's not a tragedy, General, I said, looking up at him, my eyes clear and bright. I spent my entire first life running to the front lines, risking my life for people who didn't deserve it, only to be blown to pieces in the end. This injury is a gift. It's my ticket out. Clifford looked at me surprised, but then a slow, respectful nod of understanding passed over his face. So, what's next for you? I'm taking a position as the chief instructor at the National EAD Academy, I said. I can't disarm the bombs myself anymore, but I can teach the next generation how to do it, and I'll make sure none of them ever rely on intuition again. Clifford smiled, extending his hand. The Academy is lucky to have you, Mary. You're a true hero. Thank you, General, I said, shaking his hand with my left hand. But I don't want to be a hero anymore. I just want to live. A month later, the divorce papers were finalized because of Patrick's criminal conviction and the evidence of his abuse. The court awarded me all of our joint assets, including the house, his pension, and the savings he had systematically accumulated for my work. I stood on the balcony of my new apartment, watching the sun rise over the city. The air was crisp and clean, carrying the scent of fresh rain and blooming flowers. My right wrist still throbbed occasionally when the weather changed, but the pain no longer felt like a burden. It felt like a badge of honor, a reminder of the day I took control of my own destiny. In my past life, I was a ghost destroyed by the selfishness of others. But in this life, I had rewritten the story. I took a deep breath of the cool morning air, a quiet, peaceful smile spreading across my face. For the first time in 2 lifetimes, the future was entirely mine too.